I bought Moonlight off of eBay for $635.25. It's a CNC 24 sloop built in 1975 or no, 6. I think it was 1976. I got it because I needed a boat for a season. And I didn't want to pay a lot for the boat, and I wasn't expecting to invest much time or money into the boat. I just wanted something to sail for a year. So this boat was in Rye, New York, and so the plan was to bring it from Rye, New York up to Portland, where I would store it for the winter since it was November. So I had planned 3 days for it. I had planned the first day to go from Rye to Milford, and if things went very well, I would try to get to Brantford. The second day I would go from Brantford to Saybrook, to where I keep my boat in North Cove, and on day 3 would be up the river to Portland, Connecticut. The trip would be 112 miles, and the hull speed of the boat was 5.9 knots, so I figured it was a reasonable amount of time to do the trip. The boat came with a porta potty, otherwise known as a camp toilet. I don't know why I took a picture of the porta potty, but I have so few pictures of Moonlight that I thought I would include this one anyway. Anyway, because that morning when I was setting out, I had to make sure that I cleaned it out and put the water in it and the chemicals for containing the smell and whatnot. So it was all ready to go, because, you know, you can't put anything in Long Island Sound, nor should you. And I wanted to make sure I was compliant and it was going to be convenient. The boat did come with an old grill in crappy condition, which we never used. This is just a picture looking back as we leave the harbor. And here's a picture looking forward as we leave the harbor. And when I say we, I mean me, because on day 1 I was traveling alone. I saw this and I thought, what a great idea. You can extend the area that you have to use while you're at your mooring. And then if you take your boat somewhere, I suppose you could leave your little floaty dock tied on your mooring. You'd have to have a lot of room for the boat to swing, though, because it makes it so much longer. That wouldn't work for us in North Cove because the boats are too tightly packed. So I'm jealous of this guy. Still going out of the channel at Rye, there are boats moored all around. It's a pretty long channel. This was the sail plan for most of the trip. On day 1, when I was by myself, I really didn't want to mess with the mainsail. The jib is on a roller furler, so I figured I could bring that in whenever I needed to without having to go up on deck, because I had no autopilot. It was tiller steering. It was very tender. And the plan worked very well on day 1 because the wind and seas were following, and the wind was around, well, it fluctuated between like 10 and 15 knots, so it was pretty comfortable. So this barge and tug was like a goofy optical illusion. When it was far off, it looked like it was gargantuan. It looked gigantic. But then as it approached, I realized that it wasn't as far away as I thought it was. And when I got close to it, it was a small tug with a small barge. So I was amused by this. This gives a pretty good indication of what the conditions were like. One thing that struck me right away on this boat as compared to my Nonsuch 26 was that this boat had like half the freeboard. So I felt like I was sitting practically right in the water. As you can see, we were moving right along, so making Milford was not going to be difficult. In fact, we actually made it all the way to Brantford. I'm by myself, but I keep noticing that I keep saying we, so I guess I mean the boat and I. So I made it to the dock at the Stony Creek Brewery. I went in and had myself a beer and realized at that point how exhausted I was from the day. I was so exhausted I actually didn't even have a second beer, which I usually do when I go out to a bar, and I just basically finished it and went and got back in the boat, found a dock, and went to sleep. So the next day it was raining in the morning, and my son came and joined me for the day's trip. We left Brantford Harbor. It was fairly calm, light winds. It was raining hard in the morning when he arrived, so he got all wet. So he was drying his clothes. And we were sailing along, and we got past Duck Island. And before we got to Cornfield Point, a weather system came through, and we found ourselves with a 50-mile-an-hour following wind. So always going to believe this. See the motors tipped up. Lots of wind. No sails up at all. And we were going how fast? 6.7 knots. There we go. Thrown down the sound. So with that kind of wind, we got to the Connecticut River way ahead of schedule. We had planned to go just to Saybrook on that day, and then the next day to go up to Portland. But we got to the mouth of the Connecticut River, and it was noon. So we decided to keep going. Whereas the day would have been too short if we had just stopped in Saybrook. What happened was the day turned out to be too long. We got to the dock about 9:30 that night. These daylight pictures at the dock are obviously from the next day.